1924 saw several books published by Arthur Machen. Dog and Duck, a collection of essays, was first published by Knopf in New York. The Cape edition came out a little later, but because Machen's books were now in demand and collectible, the first edition was of 900 numbered copies, of which 150 were signed by the author. The title essay refers to a game Machen played with guests in the garden at his Melina Place home, in which players had to throw an old dog ball around a course created by the paths and flower beds. Machen created an elaborate spoof history out of it, which is why this is such a nice copy. It's signed by Machen to the Reverend Woolley, with a reference to the Marylebone Dog and Duck Club, and with a postcard to the recipient from the author arranging to see him. The London adventure, published by Martin Secker in London, was also in 1924 and was published in a trade edition as well as this signed limited edition of 200 copies. This particular one came from the library of Christopher Palmer, who edited the collected Arthur Machen in 1988. And this is only the trade edition, but it was Vincent Starrett's copy, with his bookplate. And with Starrett's signature. And this is the 1974 Village Press paperback. It's the edition that I first read the London Adventure in, although this is a different copy. This once belonged to Roger Dobson. It's a great book about writing a book, and was thus postmodern before its time, and it discusses wandering around London without a map, and has been taken up as an early volume of psychogeography. This is Precious Balms, published by Spur and Swift in London, also in 1924. There were 265 signed numbered copies. This can be seen as Machen at his most mischievous, reprinting all of his bad reviews, or it was simply cashing in on the craze for his books. It does have some interest. But a rather more important book in 1924 was Ornaments in Jade, which collected the unpublished short stories and prose poems that Machen had written in the later 1890s. There wasn't a UK edition. It was published by Knopf in New York, and there were 1,000 signed numbered copies in a slipcase. They are great stories, and this really is a lovely edition. This is actually Private Copy E, one of Machen's own copies for personal circulation, inscribed to Major Adams Williams of Llangibby. Llangibby is between Caerleon and Usk, a part of Gwent that Machen knew well and often mentioned in his writings. More minor publications of 1924 include another classic press publication, The Pageant of the English Landscape by George Dewar, which has an introduction by Machen. I'm not going to include in these videos every book that Machen contributed to, only some of the more interesting, odd and collectible ones. Like this, Afterglow by Mitchell S. Buck, another 1924 book, is prefaced with an essay by Machen called On Paganism. Mitchell S. Buck's Pastels of Greek Egypt are amusing, slightly erotic prose poems. I will add another 1924 oddity, Every Girl's Annual, stories of school, adventure and sport, all very un-Machanian, contains Machen's story With the Gods in Spring, slightly oddly. Machen contributed to a number of children's books. The Treasure Cave, edited by Lady Cynthia Asquith in 1928, contained Johnny Double, which is a children's story, and The Children's Cargo, again edited by Asquith in 1930, contained Machen's short story Awaking. The following year, 1925, was also a busy one for Machen. I've already mentioned the UK edition of The Shining Pyramid and the Starrett collection, The Glorious Mystery. Machen had also written The Canning Wonder, published by Chatto and Windus. There was also, inevitably, a signed, limited, numbered edition. There were 130 of them. The story of Elizabeth Canning is an interesting one, albeit that Machen said everything that was really required elsewhere in a much shorter essay. but this was A.E. Waite's copy. Machen in this inscription is commemorating their friendship, meeting in January 1887, and taking the friendship up to date. This essay collection, Dreads and Drolls, came out in 1926, again published via Martin Sacker. There are also 100 signed numbered copies, but this was bought for me by my father in Hay-on-Wye. And yet more essays. All of these were culled from newspaper and magazine columns that Machen was writing. Notes and Queries was published by Spur and Swift in 26. There were 265 signed numbered copies, and this was Christopher Palmer's copy, signed by him on the front free M paper. And in 1927, Machen was asked to write the text for A Souvenir of Cadby Hall, which was produced by Lyons of Corner House Cafes fame. This is the only copy I've seen. I don't think it's the first. There were a few variants of this. It was a gift from Mark Valentine. And here's another oddity. Carl van Vechten's first of 7 novels about Peter Whiffle, which is called Peter Whiffle, is a comedy biography of a man who claims to be a writer but who actually writes nothing. It contains several mentions of Machen. It was first published in 1922, and this is the later 1927 edition, and the photo of Machen has been signed by Machen himself. The title page has also been signed by Arthur Machen, and it appears to be to John Galsworth or Fitton Armstrong, dated March 1931. Galsworth often brought books to Machen to be signed, and Machen had very mixed feelings on the trade in his signature. By this time his rare books were changing hands for far more money than he ever earned from them, and he didn't get a penny, of course. He tolerated Galsworth, who was obviously a fan, although Janet Machen said that he was known to the family not as Galsworth but as God help us. When in 1930 Machen wrote a small booklet for the local church, Galsworth is meant to have scooped up handfuls for Machen to sign. This one has Machen's signature again, and it appears to be for Galsworth. And though it is tempting to think this was Galsworth's own copy, he seems to have liked being associated with his literary heroes, Machen, M.P. Shield, etc., who he genuinely championed and helped to get published, but he is known to have been adept at reproducing their signatures, which means that there will always be some doubt over anything apparently signed to him.